If nothing else, I can at least learn the Flash's secret identity. I have no idea who this is.
Hi everyone, I'm Dom Griffin. I'm a film critic and you're watching The Armchair Auteur. It is an ongoing video series where I talk about movies and pop culture and things of that nature. If you're someone who loves movies and film culture and likes to see people talk about them at length, please consider subscribing. Okay, today we're going to be talking about The Flash. If you guys remember, about a few weeks ago, there was some news that broke that Warner Brothers is going to be moving forward with their production of the Flashpoint movie, which will be their first ever solo Flash movie ever, and that Ezra Miller will be returning to play Barry Allen the Flash as he did in Justice League, and that this movie will also be showing the return of Michael Keaton playing the version of Batman he played in Batman and Batman Returns. So we don't really know what the movie is going to be like now that we know it's going to be so far from the original Flashpoint comic that was also adapted as an animated movie, The Flashpoint Paradox. All we know is that Andy Muschietti, the director of It, chapters 1 and 2, is going to be directing the movie, and it's going to be written by Christina Hodson, who also worked on Birds of Prey. And if all goes according to plan and Michael Keaton signs on and stuff, we might be able to see this movie as early as 2022, assuming we don't all die from this virus. Now, that Flashpoint movie may be really cool. Who knows? We'll find out, or we won't. But it got me thinking, in the last 20 years of this mega superhero movie boom, we've never had a Flash movie, ever. And we've come close a lot of times. And while lots of characters get put in development hell and don't make it to the big screen, The Flash in particular has had a lot of different people come and go from the project on a pretty big scale. And in none of those iterations did we actually get a Flash movie, and now we're getting a Flash movie that it sounds like Batman's potentially going to be a huge focal point in. So why is that? Why have we never gotten a Flash movie up until this point? In the spirit of my other unproduced screenplay videos that I've done before, I'm going to talk about a few unproduced drafts of the Flash movie that I have read, because they're just floating around the internet, but they never got made. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the alleged Grant Morrison Ezra Miller draft that the studio didn't use that was very recent, that kind of leaked onto Reddit. And then we're going to talk about what I think is the core main reason why we haven't gotten a Flash movie yet. So I'm going to be jumping around between a couple of different topics. If you guys want to hop around, I'll put up a little timestamp table of contents of what I'm talking about and when. That way, if you've already read one of these things or already know about it, you can just skip it. Now, obviously, there have been other Flash movies in production or in development from before this, but I'm going to start by talking about David Goyer's Flash script from 2006. It was written around the same time that Joss Whedon wrote his draft of the Wonder Woman movie that never got made, and those movies were kind of on a similar trajectory at the time. You have to understand that these movies were all being produced at Warner Brothers around the same time that Marvel was getting Iron Man off the ground. So there was a point in the superhero movie history where it seemed like DC and Marvel were kind of on even footing, with DC slightly further ahead because they had bigger, more recognizable characters to play with. All of these projects ended up not working out for various reasons. But the Flash one is particularly troubling, I suppose. I say because it's actually pretty good. If you read the Joss Whedon Wonder Woman, even if you like Joss Whedon, even if you don't take into account all the things we don't know about Joss Whedon or whatever, when you read it, there's a lot of things about it where you're like, yeah, I can see why this never got made. This just wouldn't work necessarily. When I read the David Goyer Flash movie, there's only one major reason it doesn't work, but it is otherwise one of the better things I think he's written. So to get into it, David Goyer wrote this draft in September of 2006, and this draft is sort of supposed to be, loosely anyway, based on the kind of energy and tempo and stuff of his former co-writer Jeff Johns' version of The Flash from the early 2000s. So this is before Jeff became super mega Jeff Johns, who works on movies and TV shows and really bad Watchmen crossovers. This is pretty early Jeff Johns' career. His work on The Flash with Wally West is pretty good shit for the most part. This script uses a lot of similar characters from Johns' run, but it's unique in that it presents us an origin story for Wally West, the Flash, that is predicated upon Barry Allen already being the Flash. So Wally's the main character, but Barry is in it for a small chunk of time and throughout it. The basic hook for Goyer's script is that Barry Allen is the Flash, has already been the Flash, already has a rogues gallery and stuff that we don't really talk about. And Wally is his nephew that stays with him and his wife, basically. He's their kind of erstwhile teenage nephew who's kind of an idiot. He gets mixed up in this big thing, and Barry has to save his life, and in doing so, Barry comes into contact with the villain of the movie, and he dies. It leaves Barry's partner at the Keystone Police Department, Hunter Zolomon, who, if you read the books, you know is a future version of Zoom. It leaves him crippled, which he is in the comics as well, and Wally is just gives up on life, basically. His cool uncle that's the only person that's ever kind of looked out from his dead, and now he's just a nobody. So it flashes forward to the future, and Wally is grown up, and he's aimless, there's nowhere to go with his life, and he gets like hit by lightning, and then he discovers that he basically has his uncle's powers. He finds out that Barry was the Flash, and now he's the Flash, or he has the Flash's powers anyway, and he starts working with like Star Labs to like figure out how his powers work, so you get a lot of that type of stuff. It ends up being kind of a Spider-Man-esque journey about a guy who's like kind of a dick and only in it for himself, but he has all these powers, and he realizes he has to use them for good, like his cool uncle. I glossed over who the villain is because in the story, Hunter Zolomon does become Zoom, so you do get a lot of like Zoom versus Flash action for people who are heavily into speedsters fighting speedsters. But the actual villain of the movie is the Turtle, who's an old school Flash rogue who sucks. Like, he's just not an interesting character, and it really ruins the entire script. For the most part, the script is like pretty fun. It's pretty well paced. It has a good mixture of action and character development, even if the character development's a little soft, because they make Wally really like purposefully unlikable, so that when he becomes like a baseline regular person, it seems like he's become this big hero. I'm not really a big fan of that kind of storytelling, but that's what's going on here. The really big issue for me, and why it's just like ugh, is the Turtle. It just, having a Flash movie that has like this much going for it, that gets the dynamic between Barry and Wally pretty interesting, that gets like the sort of tone of what the Flash's world is like high concept science fiction mixed with sort of police procedural stuff. Like it's a cool mixture. It gets that pretty close to being right, but every time it cuts back to the Turtle plotting from jail about the Speed Force and like being old and ugly and stuff. It's like if you made a Fantastic Four movie and like the Mole Man was the villain, it makes sense because the Mole Man's like a part of the beginning of the Fantastic Four story, but no one really wants to see that. You want to see like any villain other than Mole Man. That's how it is with the Flash. The Flash has like this gigantic rose gallery full of ridiculous villains, and you guys went with the Turtle. Not a good look. But I will say, it's a largely fun script to read. It does have a lot of that like Jonesian literalism where like, you know, whatever element of a character that's in an IP because of like just years and years of writers writing it the same way, there has to be like a reason for it, you know? So it's like, oh, he's fast, but like, you know, he's moving fast in life, but he's not slowing down and look at things. Like, it's okay, that type of, you know, it actually, in many ways, it sort of mirrors Goyer's influence anyway on Nolan's Batman Begins script, where like, the concept of fear is like so deeply ingrained in the themes of the script that it's almost a little bit too much. Kind of like that, but like not as good. Now, as far as I can tell, this movie ended up not getting made because like they just kind of wanted to go in a different direction and change the approach, and I think Goyer was a little bit inflexible in that nature, and it just ended up moving on to other writers, basically. So like this version of the Flash, largely I think didn't work because it had a shitty villain, and because it wasn't quite right. Like it just needed a little more polish, I think, in my opinion, from reading it. But what's interesting is that the next version of it that I read, that was written about a year later, like doesn't really learn any of the lessons from this script. Like a lot of times when you read screenplays in succession in a production where like different writers get brought in, a writer gets kicked off or fired or replaced because he's not bringing something specific, and the studio wants a different thing, and this other person comes in and brings a different thing to it, and that fundamentally changes what it is. But sometimes you follow the production of a movie that never gets made, and the different drafts are just all differently wrong. And this draft is actually where I sort of feel like I don't know what the direction was here. I don't know what the like pitch was to make it better. So about a year out from the David Goyer draft, a writer named Chris Brancato gets brought in to kind of revamp the entire script. It's not quite a page one rewrite because it does keep the core element of Barry already being the Flash and Wally coming into his own as a grown-up and becoming the Flash. That central thing is still there. But pretty much everything else is different, and it's just a different set of problems. Chris Brancato wrote the movie Hoodlum, the Bill Duke movie. It's like a gangster movie. He also, I think, created Narcos, and he also was the showrunner for the final season of Law & Order: Criminal Intent. So he's worked on like a diverse amount of things. You would think that his approach would be much more focused on the cop procedural element and stuff, making it more like a crime fiction movie. But no, actually. What Chris Brancato does that's very different is that Goyer approach the material very specifically like this is a comic book movie. He's a guy who's written several comic book movies, whether they got made or didn't get made. He's read comics, he's written his own comics. Like he's attuned to that space. And Brancato comes in sort of as a guy that makes it more like a regular drama, at first anyway. Like it actually does just feel like a regular movie. Like Brancato's script opens up with a credit sequence of showing you what Keystone City is like and how it's just this regular town City, except that the Flash is there. And, like, the fact that the Flash protects it and is, like, this big guardian of this area is just sort of matter of fact. It's not, like, a sensational, crazy thing. It's like, hey, here's Keystone City. It's protected by the Flash. Moving right along. And you meet Wally, again, disaffected teenager who lives with his aunt and uncle because he comes from, like, a rough home. But it's much more explicit that he comes from a rough home, that his father's abusive, and that, like, he's just, like, dead inside. So the first chunk of the script, like, the first 10, 15 pages, really focuses on Barry trying to find a connection point with Wally. How he can actually, like, get into this kid's head and show him that there is someone here who does care about him. And he doesn't have to just give up on his life because it started out so poorly. And it's really touching. It's a sweet, touching, like, little opener. It's actually pretty strong. It's pretty natural. It doesn't feel too heavy-handed. Except for, again, here's another movie where it's like, you know, making, like, the life lesson a lesson about speed. Like, doesn't matter how fast you're going, Wally, but you know, that type of shit. But it's sweet. It works. I think it has a little bit of dramatic heft, and I was kind of digging it. I was like, oh, maybe this Brancato guy had it right. I've read the Goyer script a few times over the years, so I'm very familiar with it. This Brancato thing was new to me, though, so I started off being like, maybe this was the goods. This one's not the goods either. Whereas the Goyer script focuses so heavily on the science and logic of the way Flash's powers work, there's a bunch of ancillary characters who exist solely to help him learn how his powers work, like at Star Labs and stuff. This movie doesn't really have, like, any of those characters. Wally has his love interest, Linda Park, who, like, works for the police department that Barry worked at. And she has a crush on Hunter Zolomon, who's in here again, but he's even less of a character. And Wally has a best friend who's just, like, a black dude in a wheelchair. I'm not even actually sure if this is a character from the Flash mythology. I really think they just gave him a black friend, and he's in a wheelchair, so he has to be kind of like the guy in the chair. He shows up a couple times to just help him do, like, computer things. The minute Wally gets his powers and comes to Flash, it starts to fall apart. It's different and unique in the sense that you actually do follow the Flash learning how his powers work on his own, just kind of figuring stuff out a little bit. And that's fine if you're kind of going, like, the Spider-Man approach, like these movies tend to kind of do. But what makes the Flash unique as a character, at least Barry Allen's version of the Flash, was that he was intelligent and he was, like, a scientist, so he would know how his powers worked and all the cool things he can do with them, and how he can use his specific power set to fight the specific power sets of his ridiculous enemies. And, you know, ideally, like, a good Flash comic or movie or TV show or anything should have, like, a little bit of, like, science lesson energy to it. If you take all that away, it's just a guy who runs really fast and figures out that he runs really fast, and there's, like, one person who shows up and sort of loosely explains some things to him. It's just not as compelling, doesn't work as well, because you have to give the benefit of the doubt that this character, who has been presented as, like, disaffected and hollow, can run fast and suddenly starts figuring things out on his own. It also gives him much more of, like, a laser focus on revenge, because he's trying to get back to figure out who killed Iris in this version. Like, Iris dies in addition to Barry, so he finds out someone is behind killing both of them, so it's a little bit more, like, revenge-y, I'm gonna run fast and hurt the people that hurt me type thing. And again, we have to pick a villain. There's the Flash has got, like, 40 fucking villains. Who are you gonna pick to be the villain of this movie? And it's Vandal Savage, who is a cool character and is good in a lot of different Justice League stories, all sorts of different kinds of DC Comics superhero stories. Vandal Savage is a pretty, you know, multi-purpose villain, but making an immortal caveman eco-terrorist moonlight as the governor of Kansas in a Flash movie, the first Flash movie, if it had been made, it just doesn't work. It's so weird. Like, the minute you meet Mayor Van Savage, like, you're like, oh, it's this Vandal Savage. Okay, he's going to be the villain later. And you sort of think maybe they have, like, a different take on the character where they're not going to straight up say he's an immortal. Kind of like how Batman Begins used Ra's al Ghul, but they didn't get into the Lazarus Pits and stuff. Nah, he actually just tells Barry, or he tells Wally, actually, he's already killed Barry. He tells Wally that he's, like, immortal and he's, like, used to be a caveman. And it all happens in, like, a page of the script. It's just like, yep, I've been around forever. Humanity's always fucking up Earth. I'm fucking up humanity, blah, 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 whatever. It's such a, like, throw in, here's our villain, yada, yada, yada. Like, they don't even make the pretense of caring or connecting the villain to the hero or any of that stuff. Like, it's actually worse than the Turtle. At least the Turtle sort of made a little bit of sense. This is, like, really doesn't work. And they kind of offset it by also having him break a bunch of other rogues out from jail. Like, they established that Barry's already been the Flash, and that Barry already has a bunch of arch enemies, so you can just have them show up without explaining their origins and stuff. So, in addition to fighting Vandal Savage, so Wally also has to fight Heatwave, the Pied Piper, and Rainbow Raider, who, in this version, is like a serial killer who kills art critics. So yeah, it doesn't work at all. It just completely falls apart in the second and third acts, and in an embarrassing kind of way, actually. Like, reading this, I was like, oh, you know what? My original thesis might be wrong. Maybe Flash movies just haven't gotten made because all these scripts are garbage. Maybe they're all just fucking terrible. Alas, the Brancato Draft does, I think, have a lot of heart, and it does take some chances with the material and try to just tell an earnest story. I like that it sort of makes the Barry and Wally relationship less like hero and sidekick and much more like Pa and Clark Kent. He seems like a more of an actual father figure. And it's touching in a way. And it does, of course, keep in some way to keep Barry around by being a part of the Speed Force. Like, both scripts have that in common. But it doesn't work. So that's the Brancato Draft. Now, this other draft, I've never actually read, and because the script isn't like poking around online, but there was a big Reddit post very recently that talked about the alleged Ezra Miller, Grant Morrison Flash draft from roughly last year. So basically, while we've been burning through writers and directors since the Man of Steel era of DC movies, right? So ever since the Man of Steel era and the Justice League and stuff, like, DC is actively trying to make movies out of their IP again in some sort of shared universe. Throughout this process, the Flash movie has seen many, many, many more writers come and go. Like Seth Grahame-Smith, Rick Famuyiwa, just a ton of people came and went off this project, and every few months it seems like a new director gets hired, a new writer gets hired to work on the script, and like none of it goes anywhere. So we got to a point where they had a script they were pretty happy with, allegedly, and they wanted to move forward with it, but Ezra Miller was not happy with it. He thought it was a huge excursion from what they were originally talking about doing with the character, and since he's like the star and he's already been in one of these movies, he thought he had a little bit of leverage. So he and comic book writer Grant Morrison, who's done some fantastic work in The Flash in the past, and to whom The Flash, especially the Barry Allen version, is a very important character, they got together and just wrote their own Flash movie to sort of take to the studio to be like, here's the movie we want to make. You would think at least that they would try to make something that could then be mixed with the other script that was in rotation, or parts of it could be grafted to this so that Ezra could get more of what he wanted for the character into the movie. Based on this leaked plot summary, we kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. So, again, one, we do not know if this is actually the plot of Grant Morrison and Ezra Miller's script. We don't know. But I am inclined to believe it might be based on the summary. So I'm not going to get as deep into the plot summary in this one because there's a Reddit post I can just link to and you can kind of read the basics. But this would be a Flash movie that would be darker and more personal, sort of in the tone of the Zack Snyderverse DC stuff. But also is a little more inventive and a little bit more fun and compared closer to the actual comics it's based on. So this would be a movie where Barry's the Flash, the Ezra Miller we've met. It would show some of his origin like in flashback. It would continue to explore the idea that his mother was killed by someone, most likely some sort of Professor Zoom character from the future, and that he's trying to get his dad cleared of the crime because his dad's been in jail. It's essentially the similar setup to the TV show, yes. But it would be a much more straightforward movie in that Barry would be the Flash, who would be trying to fight crime in his free time and figure things out and solve his mom's murder, but he gets caught up into another murder mystery when a cop who is like his mentor is killed, and that cop is killed by his partner, and his partner is Captain Cold's sister. So it ends up being this whole thing where Captain Cold and Mirror Master and Captain Cold's sister work together to like try to break him out of prison and all this stuff and start doing heists and shit. And Barry's got to like run him down. Very straightforward, very regular Flash story. The Flash is already the Flash. He is fighting ridiculous criminals who each have like one unique science power that he can outwit. Good shit. It also teases further stuff that they could do with a Zoom character that he keeps seeing like visions of in his nightmares. And it also introduces Jay Garrick, the original Flash, or a character that could be Jay Garrick, who tells him a little bit about the way the Flash powers work, and about the Speed Force, and about time travel and paradoxes. So this would be a script that would be designed to give Barry his own full-fledged solo outing that would be his own self-contained Barry Allen as the Flash movie that then could spin into a Flashpoint style project. It sets everything up for it without having to just jump into it. And when I first read the summary, I remember kind of at first thinking like, well, you know, this doesn't really sound that much like Grant Morrison. It's not crazy. There's nothing meta about it. There's nothing like mindfuckery. But some of the elements of the story are represented from things Grant put into the Flash comic when he was writing it in the late 90s. And it's very clear that at this point in his career, Grant Morrison is not interested in doing big, flashy meta stuff anymore, and that he really wants to be able to successfully transition from comics into Hollywood. And in order to do that, he's more than willing to file down the weirder parts of his creative persona to tell fun, good stories that will help him keep getting paid to write fun, good stories. So the fact that this is sort of like a vanilla take on The Flash, when we would expect like a full-blown Crisis on Infinite Earths thing right away because it's Grant, like it's not. It sounds like it's a much more modest affair, but nonetheless really fun and works and sounds like it could have been a really nice little movie. But the guys at Warner Brothers thought that the directors of Game Night understood The Flash better than Grant Morrison, so this version's not ever coming out, if this is, of course, the real version. So then the Game Night guys got kicked off the project or left or whatever, and now we're here with the guy who did It doing it, and Ezra's still around, and we're just doing a straight-up Flashpoint movie. So why? What is going on? Why have we still not really gotten a Flash movie? So there's two primary reasons, as I said before. Reason number one is actually really obvious. It's the Flash show. Ever since the CW aired the actual Flash series, it spun out of Arrow and then helped create the whole Arrowverse, regular mainstream audiences have already been given a pretty sizable and pretty engrossing version of the Flash mythology in popular culture now. So because that exists, even though it exists wholly separate from the DC extended universe and stuff, because of that, there's just less hunger, even from regular fans, I think, to get a Flash movie that would most likely just be a 2-hour version of the first season of the CW Flash. There are a lot of different ways you can take the Flash's character, as I've said from these couple of drafts alone and also just from reading other Flash comics. But if we're being honest, any regular solo outing movie that isn't the one that Grant Morrison wrote, because apparently they didn't like that, would probably rehash a lot of stuff that audiences have already seen on this show. And unlike Superman's origin story or Batman's origin story that are like fixed, simple, finite things that are around one major character, like who is the character, The Flash is like about a legacy. There's multiple people who've been The Flash, someone from the 40s, someone from the 60s and 70s, someone from later. Like every iteration tries to mix all those things together. And the show sort of does a decent job at it. The character is Barry Allen, but some of the demeanor is much more like Wally West, especially the age and the build and stuff. So the show sort of scratches that itch. At this point, the studio doesn't have that same impetus to feel like they need to put the Flash out there to sell Flash shit. The show already sells Flash shit. So if they make a Flash movie now, they don't need to make a regular Flash solo movie. Which brings me to the second part, and that is DC's entire fractured IP-averse. They own all these characters, they own all this stuff, and right now, between the comics and the movies and everything, a lot of it's kind of muddled. There hasn't been a pretty good Flash comic in, like, ages, and there's a lot of different issues DC is experiencing because Justice League didn't pop off the way we wanted. People are wanting the Snyder Cut now. Who knows where the things are going to go from here on out. I mean, like, it's most likely DC is going to make a lot more stuff like the Joker movie, which costed a lot less than these movies and made $1 billion anyway. So there is no longer a need to create a regular movie version of the DC Comics universe like Marvel has. They don't need that. They're not going in that direction anymore. They want to be able to create as many different weird worlds and stuff to try to sell DC IP to every different version of a DC fan. Like, the Marvel Universe can't sustain multiple versions of, like, Iron Man. Also, nobody would want all multiple versions of Iron Man. They want the one true MCU RDJ Iron Man. People like Batman, and they're cool with Christian Bale Batman. They're cool with Ben Affleck coming back. They're cool with Michael Keaton coming back. They're cool with this new Robert Pattinson thing. Like, DC is now going to be able to sell multiple versions of their mythology to different audience sets. And part of doing that is finding a way to make a movie that can clearly illustrate the nature of time travel in the DC multiverse. And they're just going to use the Flash for that because his power set and unfortunately this weirdly popular Flashpoint story make that possible. So because of those things, the Flash is no longer a character that needs to be adapted to be a successful franchise. The Flash is now a conduit through which other DC worlds can be exploited and sold to people. Which is actually not that surprising because ever since the 80s, the Flash is generally used as a crisis figure to be the center of a big event that does exactly the same thing, but on a publishing scale. So this shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. So the truth is, we're probably not going to get a Flash movie anytime soon. Like a real Flash movie. We'll probably get Flashpoint. It'll probably be kind of fun, but it's not going to be a movie about the Flash. It's going to be a movie about the DC Universe and the world and how Batman's older now and where does he figure in? What other spin-offs can come out of it? The Flash is not going to matter at all. And it's a shame. You know, I think the Flash is a really great character, and I think the Flash could be the center point of a really cool franchise, and there's so much cool stuff you can do with it, But they're already fucking doing it on TV and they don't care. My friend Julian actually has an incredible idea for how to make a Flash movie, and I love it so much that I'm physically angry with him that I didn't come up with it first. So maybe if Warner Brothers changes their minds, they should just call Julian, because his take is really good. Ask him about it on Twitter sometime. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or concerns or thoughts about The Flash, please put them in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy this kind of content, if you like people reviewing movies and talking about movies and also breaking scripts down this kind of way, please feel free to subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you get notifications when I put out new videos. Hope you guys are being good to each other and yourselves. Have a great night.